I'm 32, and my name is Maris Ellery. I make a living catching light before it disappears. Charleston brides laughing under oak trees, grooms crying when no one is supposed to see. My studio is a converted carriage house that still smells faintly of salt and old wood. The morning sun hits my desk at just the right angle, soft and golden, perfect for editing. I was fixing the color balance on a bride's veil when my phone began to buzz. Mom. The name alone made my shoulders tense. I pressed accept, still adjusting exposure. Maris, she said, voice brisk as the clink of silverware at a country club brunch. I need to talk about Grant's wedding. I smiled automatically. I was about to call him, had some photo ideas for don't. The single word was sharp enough to slice through the air. You'll ruin his moment. My hand jerked. The coffee mug slipped, hit the floor, and exploded into brown and porcelain. Hot liquid bled across the planks, seeping toward the prints I'd spread out to dry. I don't understand. I managed. You do, she said. Your brother deserves the spotlight for once. It's already stressful enough planning an $800,000 ceremony without you making it about yourself. Everyone has their invitations. You don't. The silence that followed roared in my ears. Outside, gulls screamed over the harbor, the only witnesses to whatever just cracked open inside me. I could hear the faint hum of my computer, the bride on my screen frozen mid-laugh, forever radiant. I swallowed hard and said what she wanted to hear. I understand. Then I hung up and stared at that photo of strangers, wondering why their happiness looked more like home than mine ever had. The next morning, the smell of salt air still clung to my clothes. The broken cup sat in the trash, replaced by a silence that hummed louder than the gulls outside. I tried working, but every image on my screen reminded me of the same thing someone loved, someone seen. My parents had always believed Grant was the face of the family. When we were kids in Savannah, Mom would pin his Little League ribbons along the hallway, gold and blue like military honors. My drawings never made it to the wall. Once, I taped up a watercolor of the marsh at dusk, proud of how the cattails looked almost alive. The next morning, it was gone, replaced by another trophy. At 12, I saved for months to buy my first camera, a second-hand Nikon that smelled faintly of dust and possibility. Dad glanced at it, unimpressed. Cute hobby, he said, but let Grant have his turn for once. I'd never realized until then that turns could last forever. In college, when my first photograph was printed in Southern Living, Mom called to ask if Grant could borrow my car. No congratulations, just logistics. By the time I built my studio in Charleston, I'd stopped expecting their approval, but not their cruelty. The studio feels heavy today. Sunlight drifts across framed wedding portraits, laughing couples, tearful fathers, mothers adjusting veils. Every face belongs to someone who knew what it was to be chosen. None of them are mine. The door creaks open, and Ethan steps inside, camera bag slung over one shoulder. He's quiet for a moment, taking in the scattered prints, the cold coffee on my desk. You haven't eaten? He says softly. I'm fine. He studies me, patient but unfooled. I stare at a photo of a bride dancing with her father, her laughter frozen mid-spin. The words slip out before I can stop them. I think my family only loves me when I stay blurry. Ethan doesn't rush to fix it. He just reaches for my hand, grounding me in the kind of light that doesn't fade. That night, the sky over Charleston pressed low and heavy, the kind of humidity that clings to your skin and makes the air feel personal. I sat on the floor of my studio, surrounded by shards of the coffee cup I hadn't swept up, the same one that fell when Mom told me to stay away. Light from the harbor leaked through the window blinds, slicing the room into gold and shadow. Ethan crouched beside me, his jeans brushing the scattered porcelain. He didn't ask right away. He just began gathering the pieces into his palm, slow, careful, like he was afraid of hurting me more. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. You make moments for everyone else. He said, "When will you make one for yourself?" It landed somewhere deeper than I expected. For years, my life had been a series of compositions carefully framed, color-balanced, retouched until they gleamed. I'd learned to keep myself out of the frame because no one ever asked to see me there. I wouldn't even know where to start. I said. He smiled faintly, the kind that barely lifts one corner of his mouth. "Start with dinner. You cook, I'll handle dishes." We ate on the porch, cicadas tuning up in the oak trees. The air smelled like basil and salt, and for a moment, everything slowed. He talked about his recent documentary work, the film festivals. The people who lived without pretense or perfection, Giovanni used to say. Ethan murmured, "Beauty belongs to those who notice it, not those who try to own it." I looked at him, the porch lights tracing a soft halo along his jawline. Giovanni, old director from Milan. I filmed with him near Amalfi a few summers ago. Place looks like it was carved out of sunlight. He hesitated. He rents his villa sometimes. Says it's where people go when they're ready to start over. The words lingered between us. Warm and dangerous. I didn't say anything, but I felt something inside me shift, like a camera lens clicking into perfect focus. By Friday, Ethan had packed the car and insisted we drive north. Out of Charleston's dense heat and the weight that had settled in my chest, we crossed bridges that shimmered above the marshes, Spanish moss trailing like old secrets in the wind. 6 hours later, the road curved into Lake Lure, North Carolina, a quiet mirror of water ringed by forest. The air there smelled of pine and rain, clean in a way I hadn't felt in months. Our cabin sat high enough that you could see the lake breathing below. We unpacked in silence. My camera bag lay by the door, unopened, that night. Ethan lit a few candles on the porch, their flames reflecting off the dark water. He opened his laptop and motioned for me to come closer. "Remember Giovanni?" he asked. "He sent me these last week." On the screen appeared a set of photographs, stone terraces spilling over the cliffs of the Amalfi coast, vines tangled along sun-washed walls, sea so blue it looked unreal. One picture caught me, a long wooden table draped with olive branches, sunlight slanting across glasses of white wine. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "He rents his family villa for small weddings," Ethan said. 25 guests at most. No sponsors, no performance, just people who mean something. He scrolled through another image, a narrow staircase descending toward the sea, the kind of place where vows could echo and stay. The idea hit me like a tide, too wild, too tender. "You're talking about us." He looked at me, eyes steady. "I'm talking about a life that belongs to us. We keep waiting for your family to see you. Maybe it's time to stop waiting." Guilt flickered up like a match my parents' disapproval. Grant's wedding, the price of peace. Yet beneath it ran a deeper pull, one that sounded like freedom. I turned toward the dark lake, cicadas thrumming in the trees, the smell of pine thick and alive. The water caught the candlelight and sent it back toward us. I heard myself breathe the word before I even thought it. Yes. The morning after we came home from Lake Lure, Charleston felt sharper, more awake. The air held that early autumn clarity that makes colors too honest to ignore, the brick houses too red, the sea too blue, the truth too near. I woke before Ethan and sat at my kitchen table, the gold light creeping across the floorboards. My phone waited beside my coffee, heavy with a number I'd avoided calling all week. I didn't rehearse. I didn't owe an explanation. I pressed dial. Mom answered on the second ring, her voice already tight. "Maris, is something wrong?" "No," I said evenly. "Everything's fine. I wanted you to know that Ethan and I are getting married." A beat of stunned silence. Then, the explosion. "You can't be serious. While Grant is planning his wedding, you'll upstage him entirely. I'm not competing with him." "Mom, do you have any idea how stressful this is for your brother? For us, he's working with sponsors, the press. There's so much coordination. And you're just having my own life," I said quietly. She exhaled sharply, the sound of someone refusing to listen. This is exactly what I mean. You always have to take the spotlight. Be selfless for once. Dad's voice entered faintly in the background, confirming he was on speaker. Maris, your mother's right. Let Grant have his moment. For a long time. I let the noise wash over me, the familiar rhythm of their disappointment. The same tone they used when I chose art school over accounting. Only this time, it didn't sink in. The words floated above me like static. I appreciate your concern, I said finally, calm as the tide. But this isn't about Grant. Or you. It's about me. You're being ridiculous, Mom snapped. If you go through with this, don't expect anyone to come. I wasn't counting on it. I hung up before she could answer. The silence afterward didn't feel empty. It felt earned. On the counter sat the pieces of the coffee cup I'd never thrown away. I took them out of the drawer, lined them carefully on a newspaper sheet, and opened a small bottle of gold epoxy I'd bought on a whim. The resin gleamed like sunlight as it sealed the cracks, turning the fracture lines into something deliberate, almost beautiful. By the time Ethan came into the kitchen, barefoot and sleepy, I was sipping from it again. She didn't take it well, he asked. No, I said, smiling faintly, but neither did the cup. And look how that turned out. By the following week, the air in Charleston turned brittle with rumor. It started as a few messages from distant relatives, each one polished with false concern. Is it true you're trying to steal the spotlight? Grant's been under so much stress? Their words carried my mother's tone, perfectly rehearsed and distributed. By the third message, I stopped replying. At the studio, my assistant mentioned that my mother had posted a cryptic Bible verse about envy and humility. Within hours, it had 100 likes from family friends who didn't know they were applauding a weapon. Guilt hadn't worked, so now came reputation. Ethan tried to keep me focused on logistics. Let's make sure no one can interfere, he said, spreading a checklist across the kitchen table. We reviewed every booking. Giovanni's villa deposit confirmed, photographer contracts signed, travel dates locked in. The Italian notary handling our paperwork sent updates twice a week. I read them like prayers. Still, anxiety pressed behind my ribs. My mother was resourceful when she wanted control. She'd once convinced a local newspaper to replace my photo credit with family collection because she didn't like the idea of her daughter being the professional. I knew exactly what she was capable of. At midnight one evening, my cousin Alana called. Her voice trembled through static. Maris, they're calling around venues, vendors, anyone who might leak details. Mom's furious you won't answer her texts. Thanks for telling me, I said, though my throat ached. After we hung up, I found Ethan still awake on the couch. Laptop open. Giovanni has local contacts, he said, rubbing his eyes. He can arrange discreet security. Staff who know how to keep uninvited guests away. I nodded, too tired for fear, only the slow burn of resolve. He sent the email that night. The next morning, as I packed camera gear for a client shoot, a notification blinked on my phone. My mother's post stood at the top of my feed, a picture of lilies in a crystal vase with the caption, "Sometimes the kindest thing is to step back and let others shine." The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. I stared at the screen until my reflection appeared over the flowers and whispered, I already did. Charleston in late September hums like a beehive. The air carries both salt and thunder, heavy enough to blur the edges of the city. I filled my studio walls with sketches, fabric swatches, and color boards muted greens, cream linen, soft golds. On the largest board, I pinned an olive branch from the market, its scent faint and steady. It reminded me of peace, not war. The wedding began to take shape the way I build a photo through light, morning sunlight spilling across a Tuscan tablecloth, candles flickering in blue hour. A handwritten vow on textured paper. Each image in my mind replaced the noise of what my family was doing back home. Friends rallied before I even asked. Sophia, a florist client, sent me her contact in Naples who specialized in jasmine garlands. A couple I'd photographed in Savannah offered to gift their musician friend to play at the ceremony. My inbox filled not with gossip, but generosity. Yet, one humid afternoon, while thunder cracked over the harbor, I hovered over my email draft to Giovanni, my finger poised above cancel booking. The guilt still found its way back, whispering that I'd caused too much trouble, taken up too much space. Ethan appeared in the doorway, rain dripping from his hair. He saw the email on my screen, his expression quiet but certain. If you delete that, you let them win. He said, "We're not building this to prove anything. We're building it because it's ours." Something in his voice steadied me. I closed the laptop and exhaled, the sound somewhere between surrender and relief. That night, while cicadas sang through the storm, I rewrote everything: the guest list, the vows, even the timeline. No posed shots, no rehearsed smiles. I wanted the day captured as truth raw hands, wind in the hair, laughter unscripted, a documentary, not a production. When the storm finally broke, I stepped onto the porch barefoot. The air smelled of rain and magnolia. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang for a wedding I would not attend, and for the first time, I didn't feel left out. The terrace smelled of jasmine and salt. Waves murmured far below, soft as breath against the cliffs. Above the horizon, the Amalfi sun began its slow descent, turning the stone walls honey-colored. Guests moved quietly through the villa courtyard, 25 people, every one of them someone who had stayed when others didn't. I waited by the open doors, bare shoulders against silk the color of warm milk, no veil, no train, just fabric that moved like water when I walked. James adjusted his lens near the edge of the terrace, his focus steady even as the wind lifted the olive branches above him. Ethan stood facing the sea, his gray suit catching the same light that glowed on the water. Giovanni, who had insisted on officiating himself, gave a small nod for me to begin. My footsteps echoed over the stone. Each one felt like a decision I'd been years too late to make. When I reached Ethan, he took my hand, no hesitation, no audience to please, only the steady rhythm of our breaths aligning. Giovanni's voice was soft, but sure. "Marriage," he said, "is the art of seeing clearly." The world fell silent except for the sea and the distant hum of a boat engine fading into dusk. Ethan spoke first, his voice low and shaking just enough to be human. "I promise to see you, not the version others edit." When it was my turn, I unfolded the small paper I'd written in the margin of a flight itinerary. "I promise never to dim, not for comfort, not for approval, not even for love." As we slipped the rings onto each other's fingers, the light hit its peak gold breaking across the waves, reflections dancing on our joined hands. James crouched low, camera poised. I heard the soft click just as the sun disappeared. Applause rose like a tide behind us. I turned toward Ethan, tears slipping down my cheeks, the salt indistinguishable from the sea air. For the first time, I didn't feel framed, I felt seen. 2 days after the ceremony, I woke to sunlight pouring across our hotel sheets and a phone that wouldn't stop vibrating. James had posted one photo from the wedding, the one where Ethan and I stood in profile. Hands joined, the sea behind us turned to molten gold. He'd captioned it simply, "Light that doesn't ask permission." By noon, the image had been shared thousands of times. By evening, it crossed oceans. Helena Baxter, the same photographer whose books lined my studio shelves, reposted it with the words, "This is what authenticity looks like." The Italian Tourism Board followed, calling it the year's most honest wedding. My inbox became a flood. Editors from New York and London wanted interviews. Strangers wrote paragraphs about courage, about light, about choosing peace. Brides-to-be offered deposits without seeing a portfolio. My clients' names blurred together into a haze of gratitude and disbelief. Ethan read aloud from his phone, amusement soft in his voice. Photographer banned from brother's wedding captures year's most authentic ceremony. That's the headline on Vogue Italia's site. I stared at him, dazed. They used banned. They used truth. He corrected. And they're not wrong. He set the phone down and looked at me for a long time. This, he said, is what they were afraid of you being seen for who you really are. Outside, the bells of a nearby church began to ring, the same rhythm that had carried through the air on our wedding day. The sound filled the room like sunlight through glass. I sat at the edge of the bed, phone still glowing in my hands. Notifications kept blooming like tiny flares across the screen, the world reaching for a story I never meant to tell. Somewhere inside the noise, I felt an impossible, quiet half-disbelief, half-peace, as if the light had finally found its way home. 6 months later, Charleston hums with the slow rhythm of spring, the scent of wisteria curling through the open windows of my studio. On the wall above my desk hangs James's photograph from Amalfi, framed beside the gold-mended coffee cup. The two belong together, one born from fracture, the other from light. The viral wave has settled into something steadier. My inbox is no longer chaos, but purpose. Ethan and I founded the Love Without Permission Foundation, a small grant for photographers told their dreams were unrealistic. We run it out of the back room, between shoots and deadlines, fueled by takeout coffee and conviction. Jessica, 22, arrives every Thursday for mentoring sessions. She reminds me painfully of myself, the quiet posture, the way she apologizes before sharing her work. Today, she shows me a portrait of her grandmother watering plants at dawn. It glows with tenderness. They said this style is too plain. She murmurs, "It's honest." I tell her, plain is what truth looks like before people decorate it. Her smile is small but certain, watching her leave. I feel something open inside me, proof that healing multiplies when you pass it forward. That evening, I stand under the soft light of an award ceremony downtown. The room smells of lilies and champagne, the kind of event my parents would have adored if the applause had been for Grant. When I step to the microphone, I don't feel the old tremor of needing approval. Authenticity isn't selfish. I tell the crowd, it's how we survive the dark. Later, back at the studio, sunlight filters through the blinds in long golden stripes across the Amalfi photo. I touch the frame, feel warmth on my skin, and whisper into the quiet, when they made me smaller, I learned to find bigger light.